Okay, the next part of this program, I think we've set this up well in terms of trying to find a metaphorical structure in jazz music to explain what some of the modern dynamics, or help us understand what some of those modern dynamics in leadership are. And of course, we talked extensively about some of those dynamics. And so that's setting the tone here a little bit. What I want to do for the next hour or so is to propose leadership. These are going to be fairly high-level, 30,000-foot ideas that I think help capture what leadership can be, how it operates, give you some advice, but also just get you thinking about it, to provoke you, to draw out of you what some of your assumptions are about leadership, and how those assumptions govern your behavior, oftentimes unconsciously govern your behavior. So I'm going to work through 10 different propositions, and then answer each one of the propositions. Like always, please add, comment, make observations at any given moment. So, proposition number 1. Consider this. What do you think those 3 47s stand for? Oh, by the way, it doesn't add up to exactly 100,000. There's probably some of you who have already determined that, okay? And but just leave it, okay? It's fine. It's close enough. It's close enough. Okay? So, what do you think those stand for? That is based on time, passage of time. Think about your careers.
47 hours a week, 47 weeks a year for 47 years.
That's exactly right. So I read a study in put out by the Society for Human Resource Management that looked at what the average productive working career of a professional is. And they said it was 100,000 hours. So I kind of broke that down into these 3 components and found exactly what you said. If you work 47 hours a week, 47 weeks per year, for 47 years, there's your 100,000-hour career. 47 hours a week, well, because yes, it's 40 hours a week, but you do some things extra, you do a little work on the weekend, make a few calls, whatever. 47 weeks per year, well, you got your 2 or 3 weeks vacation, but then you have all the extra time around the holidays, Columbus Day, all these sort of things, which is time off work. So it makes it about 47 weeks engaged, so 5 weeks off. And for 47 years, and if you think about it, that's the average career, isn't it? So if you start in the workforce at 23, 24, you retire at around 70 or so, you've worked 47 weeks. Or excuse me, you've worked 47 years. So I got interested in this, and I thought, what's half? When's it become 50,000? Okay. And of course, I thought it was 27.5 times 27.5 times 27.5. But of course, my friends in the quant department were very, very quick to make fun of me and to point out that it's not that. So 37 times 37 times 37 equals 50,000. So if you're trying to figure out on the 50,000 number, what it would look like, 37 times 37 times 37. But this is kind of a ridiculous number, right? Because who only works 37 hours a week for 37 weeks per year for 37 weeks? Who works that schedule? Europeans. The French, the Greeks, I don't know. Maybe some civil service workers. But so this isn't a particularly helpful number. But then I really started to think about how the people that I work with, that I encounter in the business world, how many hours they work. What do you think the average working hour is for today's hard-driving professional? How many hours a week are they working? 60. Let's say 60. Okay. How many weeks per year do they work? 50. Okay. And what that means is that in a mere 17 years, their career is half over. In a mere 17 years, their career is half over. Now let's take that 60-hour-a-week number because yes, there's the time in the office, but, right, you're on your phone. Even when you're on the beach, you're still on your smartphone answering emails because God forbid that whole organization will fall apart if you're not there. Okay, so you're working that. On your vacations, on those holidays, I'll bet a lot of you people sit and spend 2 hours checking your email on Christmas Day. Or whatever your I know, Tanya, she's been in one of my other classes. That does not surprise me that she said that. Or whatever your major religious holiday is, that you spend time even on that day. So you're really working 50 hours a week. And so it really comes down to, in a mere 17 years, in a mere 17 years, your career is half over. This does not sound like leadership development right now, does it? This sounds like outplacement. This sounds that you guys already need to start thinking about the end of your careers. Okay? Yeah?
Wouldn't you argue, though, that the people that are working those hours, that they're not going to be at the 100,000 of their typical career? So 50,000, they're not really at their halfway point.
So you're saying that they have a capacity to work more than 100,000?
Right, those people are still going to work the 70 year.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's certainly the case. There's differences in terms of our capability to sustain ourselves physically, emotionally, and intellectually over a long period of time. So there's certainly people that are going to have the ability to work more than that. I'm talking about average. Okay? I'm talking about average, and their focus in the study was average productive working career. Now, if you think about 47 times 47 times 47, okay, that's still a lot of work. But at the end of this time, at the end of 47 years, you have been granted this most rare of qualities called wisdom. And then you retire. Over 47 years, you've made pretty much every single mistake anybody can make. But what's different about it is because you're only working 47 hours a week, for 47 weeks a year, you have an opportunity to reflect on all of those failures, on all of those experiences. And as I said before, when I was opening up this class, the difference between an extraordinary practitioner and a mediocre practitioner is this habit of reflection on what happened to them. And if you're working 60 hours a week for 50 weeks a year, you don't have time. You don't have time to do it. Here's the setup. Here's the point. Leadership can be developed. It can be, but it takes time. It takes time. And we're burning the candles at both ends. Leadership development is a marathon, and we're sprinting. And you ain't going to finish the marathon if you're sprinting. You're not going to finish. This has enormous implications for leadership succession. Enormous implications for it. Because we're talking about burnout here, right? We're talking about burnout. We're talking to the ability to people and their central nervous systems to continue to absorb everything that's going on around them. Once again, emotionally, physically, and intellectually. Okay? And by the way, we all have different central nervous systems. Some of them are more resilient than others. So some of us are going to crash even before then. Some, to your point, Brian, might be such that they can sustain themselves in a longer period of time. We're going to talk about some methods, or what I call sources of renewal, later on in the class. So that's proposition one. Right? Leadership can be developed, but it takes time. And for you to develop your own leadership, you need to think about it, and you need to make time for the habit of reflection. What happened to me? Why did it happen to me? What could I do differently? Consider the British version of The Office. I was living in London when this show came out. Ricky Gervais, genius comedian, and genius idea for a show. And I watched this show and thought, there is no way this will play in America. It's too cynical and disaffected. The Brits think this is funny. We won't think this is funny. Okay? I was wrong. Now, there's a fundamental difference between the British version. Anybody seen the British version? Okay? And the American version, what's the difference?
I think the humor is different. I think that Ricky Gervais is a little more snide and sarcastic in
Okay.
a way that I don't think that Steve Carell is.
Michael
not as
Scott, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Other take? Oh,
It's
microphones,
similar
guys,
take.
I'm sorry. Microphones.
I just had a similar reaction. It's just the humor is British humor versus American humor.
Okay, okay. Here's what I think the difference is. Okay, is that David Brent is an incorrigible, universally a miscreant. He is an ass of the highest order. He is unrecoverable. He is completely unlikable. He has no human instinct in him, humane instinct in him whatsoever. Where Michael Scott was different, right? We would root for Michael Scott. Oh gosh, I hope Michael gets this done. You know, whether it was a relationship, whether it was some sort of initiative, whatever it was, we were like, oh, Michael. You had to Americanize it that way, right? You had to kind of take the edge off it. All right. But why do we watch this stuff? How many of you watch The Office at some point of your life? Right, pretty much everybody. Why do we watch it?
Funny.
It's funny, okay.
It's actually pretty true. A lot of the stuff in terms of how things really work in HR, or the alternatives of what people are focusing on work for a certain amount of time, but then
Okay.
all in between they're putting staplers in Jell-O, or not focusing on the mission.
Okay, and it's true. That's why we watch it. It's true. We see our own organizations in it, don't we? And we see all the dysfunctionalities that we live through every day in this. Okay? You gotta put a cover memo on your TPS reports. You gotta do it. Okay? Even though it makes no sense, it's not helpful, it takes time, you have to do it. We see this in here. What are other reasons we watch this?
I think because sometimes you feel like you can't talk about work with people, or if things aren't going well, you're not supposed to address it after a certain point.
Right?
And this is kind of an outlet for that.
Good.
Just knowing you're not the only one that gets frustrated or.
Good. I mean, he's got two things here, right? He's saying it's cathartic. You can't talk about this stuff with your colleagues at work, so you can at least watch it on here and talk to people about it, and everybody thinks it's funny. Okay? But there's also this social comparison element that he pointed out to. Whew, I'm glad I'm not as bad as those guys. Okay, we're bad, but it's a little bit better. Okay, it's a little bit better for us. Okay? And we recognize people in this show, don't we? Okay, you've got some of these people, exact people, working in your organizations. Every office has a Michael Scott. And if you don't know who it is, it's you. It's you. Now, what I think about this is reality TV. It is not reality TV when you take a bunch of B-level celebrities and drop them in the jungle of Suriname. That is not reality TV. This is reality TV. This is rubbernecking TV. This is train wreck TV. And yet we can't help but watch it, because it does describe our lives. It's the same reason why we read Dilbert and have Dilbert cartoons up in our office or on our refrigerator or whatever it is. Okay, it's the same instinct and urge here. It's a recognition of the imperfectness of our organizational lives and the dysfunctionality of them. So what's the proposition here? We want leadership, but we kill it. In our organizations, we find ways, intentionally or unintentionally, to prevent leadership from emerging. We allow this kind of dysfunctionality that makes us cynical, makes us feel helpless and discouraged. So why do it at all? Why do this at all? What are some ways in which we prevent leadership from gaining traction?
from asking for one set of behavior but rewarding the opposite?
Okay, all right. You had an article today to read by a guy named Stephen Kerr, right? With Stephen Kerr, the title is so good, you don't even need to read the article. The folly of rewarding A while hoping for B. So we reward behaviors that are not the behaviors that we claim to want. So we say we want teamwork, right? We want teamwork. Okay, we want collaboration. Okay? We want innovation. But they punish you when that innovation fails. They don't measure teamwork very well. Okay? How many of you love your performance appraisals? I've never seen anybody raise their hand when I ask that question. Because these intangibles like teamwork, collaboration, are hard to measure. And so there's just one little, usually a little, like 3 lines, where your supervisor can write something about those. And maybe a question or 2 on a 1 to 5 scale. Okay? They're harder to measure. And so we stay away from them. We reward other things. I'll tell you about a study, not a study, but a project I did when I was living in London for Morgan Stanley. Morgan Stanley was having a lot of churn on the trading floor. Okay? Just very short periods of time where people stayed in the job, so they had to find somebody else to bring in. And they brought me in and hired me to examine this issue and to try to determine what the root cause of this was. So we did interviews, we did surveys, we spent time with it. And what we found out, very simple, was let's say that this is the pharmaceutical trading desk. And Stacy is the desk head. Her job is to help acclimate all the new traders, okay? Help them learn their job, help them get their footing, help them get good at this. Right? But Stacy was compensated based on her trades. So every minute she spent helping Griffin came out of her pocket. Guess what? Stacy didn't spend much time trying to help Griffin. Okay? Because she's been put in this situation where she's told, you're the desk head and we want to help you, want you to help people develop, but they rewarded something else. So, prepare the report, go back to the senior VP of HR at Morgan Stanley and say, this is the problem. Well, how do we solve it? I said, well, you solve it, you have to change Stacy's compensation system. You've got to change it so that she's on a higher salary base, less of it based on her trades, that allows her to make the same money that she would have simply by trading, so that now she has time to go and spend with these other people. And they said, great, you're right. I said, well, you're going to do anything about it? And they said, no. And I said, why not? They said, well, we don't really care about the churn. Like, we don't really care about the churn. Okay? Another smart, young, ambitious East Londoner trying to make it in the world will take this job, will work like crazy for 8 months, burn out, and quit. But we got 8 months of crazy work. We're perfectly happy with this. And I said, well, let me get this straight. You just paid me some money, and not an insignificant amount of money, to do this and identify it, and you had no intention to do anything about it. Why? And they said, well, we felt like we just needed to do something so that we could tell the board we've examined this issue and we feel like it's been resolved or it's not significant. So it was all symbolic. There was no intent to do anything with it. But at the basis, Brett, that's what it was about, is we want this behavior, but we're going to reward something else. And we see this in organizations all the time. You find it in legal law firms where we made you managing partner of the law firm, but we're still compensating you based on billable hours. Okay? We tell you that we want teamwork, but we're still rewarding you and evaluating based on your individual contribution. Okay? So that's one very significant way that we prevent leadership from taking hold in our organizations. So, do you have a question?
It was just actually, I was in that situation. It's not a question, but I was an analyst at Morgan Stanley where I had to actually kind of learn everything on my own because of that situation where people were kind of doing their own thing because that's how they got paid.
Right.
And so it was just a steep learning curve on my own.
Okay. All right. All right.
I was just going to ask you, because what struck me was that the article is 20 years old almost next year.
Yeah.
And so why are we still here? I mean, why aren't organizations changing their structures? I mean, unless it's just your example.
Well, I mean, he asked this brilliant, I mean, first off, the article is timeless, right? I mean, this is going to be, and the reason why it's timeless is because it's going to be like this in another 20 years. Steve Kerr, by the way, went on to be the Chief Learning Officer of General Electric and is now the Chief Learning Officer of Goldman Sachs. Okay, so he was a professor that kind of tried to put the money where his mouth was and tried to implement programs around that in those two firms, and did okay at GE and is struggling at Goldman Sachs, and I'll tell you why at a later time. But his point is simply that if we know something like this, why don't we do something about it? What's the answer?
Part of it is just what you said, that data, there are things that are easy to measure and there are things that are hard to measure. And a lot of it comes down to that because people supposedly want something that's objective, but all of these important things are not objective.
Most organizations are overmanaged and underled. That surprise anybody? What about your own organization? Is it overmanaged and underled? Okay. Now back to your question, Griffin. Is part of it is exactly what Kevin was saying here, which was it's easier to manage individual performance. It's easier to manage and get your hands and your heads around those things. And organizations like numbers. Right? We like numbers. Okay? We like them because we have a board to report to. We like them because we have to position ourselves to Barclays Bank or to Wall Street, to institutional investors. And you know what those guys want to see? They want to see numbers. Okay? They don't want to hear about your new teamwork measurements. Good on ya. Okay? They don't care. Okay? What's happening to my portfolio? That's what I care about. And that's another thing that prevents organizations to take it another step from innovating. Because, wait a minute, I've got your stock in my pension plan, my pension portfolio, so I'm a big pension manager. I've got your stock here because it's a reliable dividend-producing stock. Now you're saying to launch this innovation, you're going to reduce the dividend payout to fund this. That messes up my whole portfolio. And by the way, I own 500,000 shares. And if you do this, I'm going to dump them on the market, and that's going to drop your price down. Well, I guess we won't do that innovation. I mean, here's the logic, and it's all about, going back to your point, rewarding one thing while hoping for another thing. Right?
I've worked in an organization where they do try to reward group performance, but what I noticed, and there was a lot of negative feedback based on it, is that a team could work great together and everyone's effort could be in the right spot at the right time, but there's a lot of outside factors that could negatively influence how the team does.
Right.
So you could have a team that's performing better than any other team in terms of what a team is supposed to do that performs worse than another team that might have just gotten lucky by some outside factor.
Right.
So that can be really discouraging to the team that's working the right way.
Yeah, you could argue though that happens at an individual level as well. It's sort of an attribution thing. You didn't do well on something, even though it wasn't your fault. Okay, but I still have to evaluate you at some point, and you didn't meet these targets, even though it was because of a difficult client, even though it was because of something completely outside of your control. And part of the reason why we do that is that we focus on people, not events, not environment. So when we're making an attribution about what happened here, it's much easier to say, her is what happened, as opposed to these complex set of circumstances around that. Right? So that's, I think that's part of the explanation. You're right, but it's part of the explanation. Other reasons or other ways in which our organizations prevent leadership from getting a foothold.
This may go along with the other propositions that you're going to be presenting, but I think a big item is following through. And an example would be, I worked for an organization a couple years ago where there was a disconnect between the employees and the leadership for quite some time. So they brought on a third-party consultant to obtain data, take surveys from the employees, and then a team building presentation was conducted for a 1 or 2 day period. And I think it was pretty successful for the first 2 weeks or so, but within a month or so, it seemed like the organization was back to the norm, and
Right.
that went on for another 2 years.
Right. Good.
So-
Yeah, I'm sorry to cut you off. We're really good at initiating things. We're not very good at keeping momentum. It's one thing to say, yay, here's a good idea, let's do it. And we get a lot of people excited about it, but then it just dies out, right? The spark versus oxygen. We're going to talk about this a little bit later on as well as the fact when we get to the Belbin next week, the rarest role on the Belbin, and you guys don't understand the roles yet because I haven't told you about them, is the completer finisher. People in groups who their preference, their inclination in groups is to wrap it all up, tie it up, and keep it moving. Okay? Nobody wants to do that, right? That's just this detail stuff. Everybody wants to be involved in the idea phases and all this, but when it comes through to following through, exactly to your point, Matthew, we are disinclined to do that in terms of our own preferences. Nobody wants to be that guy. Other reasons why our organizations prevent this from getting root, prevent leadership from getting root.
Kind of going on your overmanaged, underled, I think there's a big disconnect between the leadership roles, executive leadership roles, and the management. And the management kind of kills some of the leadership on more the staff level, whether it be they want more yes men on their in their teams, they feel threatened that this person may overjump them, or they just don't want to lose this person to a promotion somewhere else.
Okay, all right, so kind of a turf in a way. You know, this needs to be protected, and all these other things might invade my turf and then compromise my power or influence. So, back behind you, please. Gary?
Thanks. I don't think we recognize the context of effective leadership, and then as soon as we see it, we assume that it'll move and that same leader will work in a different role.
Right.
So that happens all the time in school systems when there's a really effective principal who's doing a great job at the school level, and therefore that means that they're going to be a great assistant superintendent of something or other.
Right.
So, and then ultimately it falls apart.
So we're putting people in positions that they're not actually suited to lead in. They've got great leadership skills here, okay, but they don't necessarily have those skills in that other domain. That's very true. We do the same thing in academics. You know who we usually make the dean?
Bad teachers.
We usually make the dean, no, that might be true, I'm going to step away from that one. We usually make as our dean the best scholar. Now, you know how they got to be the best scholar? They locked themselves in their office for the last 20 years and didn't talk to anybody so that they could be the best scholar. They tend to be introverts, and then we say, go lead us. Okay? It's a classic mistake of confusing performance with leadership. Never make that mistake. Never make that mistake. A good performer is not necessarily a good leader. And a good leader in one domain might not be a good leader in another domain. Okay? So in some ways we can shoot ourselves in the foot, and exactly what Daniel said, you're doing great, you got to be promoted. And well, we've got the, what do they call it? The Peter Principle, right? You're promoted to your level of incompetency. So we promote you to the point where you're now incompetent. So this universal belief a leader here can be a leader there is flawed. Over here. Daniel?
Professor, I think you're hitting on something that I've kind of grappling with. I don't have a solution to, but basically it's, what do you do when everyone in the organization, this is maybe we don't answer now, but throughout the course of the class, everybody in this room knows career advancement is tied to leadership. So everybody is trying to be the leader. So everybody wants to be the chief. No one wants to be the Indian. What do you do? So that I know it's in my best interest to be the leader, even though my skill sets don't meet, but I'm going to pretend as hard as possible to be that leader. And the organizational dynamics are very complicated when everybody's trying to do that same thing, and it's very difficult to have a team in that regard. So that's just something I'm...
Anybody got a response to that? That your career advancement might be conditioned by your taking charge, even though that might not be the right thing to do, that somebody else is more skilled, but you've got to draw attention to yourself in order to advance in the organization.
Yeah, it's something that I had kind of grappled with as well, and I've kind of given it my own term, I kind of call it the vampire effect, where there's a person, say your current supervisor, your boss, who obviously takes into account that they need to be in this leadership role and further progress, but at the same time they know they're supervising you. Even though you may have the skills too, they'll kind of suppress you, take your skills, suck it out of you, and then they'll take it and then they'll move on because they're trying to go further on in the organization. And it kind of works within the team itself at sometimes as well. People will just kind of step on others at other times just because they know in order to get ahead they have to get in this leadership role of some sort.
Right. Yeah. Well, I don't really know the answer. Tanya, you got a comment?
It was not regarding that, but it was regarding your previous statement.
Okay, so let me just address this for a second. I don't really have the answer, but I think that what we're talking about is organizational priorities and organizational alignment. And the jazz metaphor, that I'm not supposed to lead in every different situation, and you need to recognize that. Once again, we have folly of rewarding A while hoping for B here right now. Collaboration and all that is probably being encouraged, but what is actually being rewarded is when you take control, step on other people's territories to draw the attention to you so that you are rewarded for it in a form of promotion. So it's a structural and reward and communication issue that's preventing that leadership to get root here. So, okay.
So I guess two things I thought about when you mentioned about why kill leadership, or good leaders. And one is, I think in organizations nowadays, networking and politics is huge. And I think a lot of times, great leaders, if you don't get along with the individuals who are most popular or the concepts that are most popular, you're ostracized, and a lot of times you probably won't be in that role very long. And I think the office politics, as well as like the channels, so a lot of times bigger organizations have so many standards and protocols you have to go through that if you really want to be creative, you really want to challenge it and have something good to present, if it doesn't go through the channel successfully, it'll never become anything efficient.
Okay, and I mean, let me just put another name to this. Bureaucracy, policy and procedure. You have to put a cover memo on your TPS reports. Okay? You've got to move through all these steps. And so any good idea, by the time it gets through this, might be incidental or insignificant at this point because the environment has changed so quick that this no longer is relevant, or it gets homogenized through this process. So that prevents us from moving forward because it links us to a process that is bureaucratic in nature and is going to have people involved in it that don't really even have a stake in its outcome. So.
Yes, I kind of wanted to address the questions that we had over there in regards to leadership and some of the stifling that goes on there. And from experience in some organizations where I worked where in the OB role, we kind of evaluated where they're working with team members and coaching them for leadership to expand in those type of positions where their supervisor might be kind of holding them back for certain political reasons within the organization. We went and evaluated their social network and how they related and their connections, and we went in there and kind of approached, instead of having direct leadership within your exact project team or within your phylum or your domain, to expand your sphere of influence in that regards and practice more soft influence across the organization, and then also work with them to identify the social network connections that they have within their organization and find the linkage points to the different departments or functional teams and work your leadership on strengthening those connections between teams, which allows you to kind of distribute your leadership role indirectly.
Okay, very well said, very well said. I'd raise another one, and again, every once in a while I'll kind of cut off discussion just to manage time a bit here. Another one I'd point out is culture. Okay. Well, this is the way we've always done it. Same as it ever was, same as it ever was, same as it ever was. And so we have to do it this way. We start in organizations speaking in acronyms. I'll bet in your firms you've got all sorts of different acronyms. Well, that's the KPI to the TRX to the LMO. And somebody understands what you just said. Nobody else outside the organization is. So guess what? Language is mine. Okay, Noam Chomsky made a very compelling case for this, and I think it's true. The language we use determines how we think. It determines what we see in the environment. You see what you're prepared to see, and you're prepared in part through your culture. The other things that organizations in terms of a cultural sense do is, well, I'll give you a story. My brother-in-law, when he first started his job at Northern Trust Bank, very conservative Chicago bank. Okay. My brother-in-law is 6'9", and his name is Merlin Schooneman, and he's hard to miss. He went in his first day at work. He went in the first day at work in a tan suit. Apparently, he didn't get the memo. But there is no memo. There is no formal policy about this. But it was subtly made known to him that that was inappropriate. So, not quite sure about women. I think women have a little bit more room around what they can wear in a conservative work environment. Men, we don't have very much room, do we? What about colors of suits? What colors of suits can you wear? Blue or gray? Or maybe black, depending. Black can be a little flash. So, what colors of shirts can you wear? White or blue? Okay. What about what color ties? Red, blue, variations there. Not yellow. Yellow is reserved for the executive branch. You can't wear yellow ties unless you're an executive. Right? What about shoes? What color shoes can you wear? No, you can't wear brown shoes in an American bank. Way too European. Okay, it's way too European. You wear black shoes. Maybe you can do some of those maroon-colored ones. I don't remember exactly. Oxblood, I think is what they call it. And so maybe that. So not only do you now speak the same, you work for the same company, you've got the same objectives, you were hired by somebody because you were like them. Okay. That's why they hired you, is because I like this guy because he's like me. So I'm going to hire him. Okay. So I'm not getting diversity in my workplace. But now you all look alike. You look alike. Have you ever gone and paid attention at a corporate headquarters about what people look like? They look the same. It's hard to distinguish them. It's like a herd of giraffes. You know, I don't know, I guess everyone has a different pattern of stripes, but I can't tell. I just can't tell here. So culture can be a huge impact in terms of preventing leadership from really getting root, because Tanya, that's not the way we do it here. That's not the way we speak to people. That's not the way we present ideas. Okay? Organizations are homogenization machines. They make us all look, act, and think alike. And we're going to talk more about this when we talk about culture. There are a few examples of organizations that have been overled and undermanaged. And I'll give you an example, the entire financial services industry in 2007. Because all of a sudden, these guys are selling, packaging exotic derivatives like collateralized debt obligations with primary, secondary, and tertiary tranche payouts with no asset backup value. What happened to risk management? What happened to the management function here that said, no, we can't do this. We could lose our shirts. And look, that cost this economy trillions of dollars. We're still not recovered from it. And in your investment portfolio, it cost you money, and you're not yet recovered from it. This was real consequences. By the way, I'm now doing some work for Goldman Sachs. Okay? And I can't tell you about the specific work, but I can tell you that I work with both the revenue side, which is the New York side, and this is the traders and so forth, and the Jersey City side, which is what they call the enterprise business, and the enterprise business is all the other functionality of the organization. It's interesting to me that revenue is in New York, and risk management is in Jersey. So, so not only are they separated, they're separated by buildings, they're separated by state, they're separated by a river. Okay? So it's a very interesting case where it's like, I'm not surprised this stuff happens. Okay? I'm not particularly surprised when you push your risk management and other management functions like HR and so forth across the river. Okay? We make money here. You guys work for us. Okay? And by the way, you're in Jersey. I don't, Anybody from Jersey, please don't. I lived in Jersey for a while, so, and worked there. So, okay, so consider this. Got a couple of characters up there that are easily recognizable, some of them who aren't. Okay, let's take a look at Marissa Mayer, CEO of Yahoo. When she first walked into office, what did she do? What was one of her first orders of business?
She changed the telework policy?
Yeah.
She changed the telework policy?
Yes, right. She severed the work-at-home policy. Okay? Can't do it anymore. Now, who are some of the primary beneficiaries of that policy?
Stay-at-home moms.
Stay-at-home moms. Okay. All right, so here, a female CEO comes in, hatchets an extremely popular program at the detriment, particularly to a female work constituency, and then she delivers her own baby and has built next to her office 1,000 square foot playroom. And a nanny that's there all day long, okay? Nursery, and so she can stop over and see her kid anytime she wants to. Ooh, right? Ooh. Okay. All right, let's take a look at this woman in the bottom left-hand corner. Anybody know who Gina Reinhardt is? Gina Reinhardt is the wealthiest woman in Australia, one of the top 25 wealthiest women in the world. She was heir to a mining fortune and still runs that firm. And in a recent interview talking about pay and livable wages and so forth, she said, "I don't understand. These Africans are willing to work for $1 a day. Why should I have to pay them any more?" Okay, we're in Washington. Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney had a couple famous comments during his campaign. There was the 47% one and that. Okay. But there was another one when he was asked a question about diversity in his cabinet. Anybody remember what he responded with?
Binders full of women.
I got binders full of women. Really? Binders full of women? It's a little S&M to me. And of course, here recently, well, in that same campaign, Obama had a gaffe. You know, if you built a business, you started a small business, you didn't build that. You remember that comment? He was talking about infrastructure and so forth that helped build it, but still very, very poorly framed. And then here recently, right before the election, this isn't about me, it's about my policies. And that one didn't help him either. Oh, another recent one that just came out. Joe Biden, 2 weeks ago, talking to an audience at Harvard, and was asked the question about the true power of the vice president position. And it looked like it didn't have any power. Anybody remember what his response was? Yeah, this vice president job, it's a real bitch. Okay, and Biden is famous for, right, you know, putting his foot in his mouth here, but it's like that show, Veep. You know, if any of you have ever watched that show, it's great because it shows that the vice president has no power. The senators won't even really talk about him. The reps will bully them because you're nothing here. You're insignificant. So Susan Komen, founder and head of the Komen Foundation, which has done remarkable work in terms of donating money for research and treatments, particularly for breast cancer. What happened recently with her? Do you remember? She denied funding to Planned Parenthood. Now she did it for a reason, a legitimate reason, which is Planned Parenthood is under federal investigation. And their policy is that we'll give no money to an organization that is being investigated by the government. Okay? But that message somehow got lost. Okay? What we thought it was interpreted as a political movement, a pro-life movement and decision. Okay? And so donations to the Komen Foundation are at a 9-year low. So, what's the point of all this? Why am I banging on about this? Some people already brought this term up, Greg and some others, and I'm glad you did. Leaders are in the spotlight. You're being watched. If you're a supervisor, if you've got people reporting to you, if you're in any level or position of responsibility within an organization, and maybe can call yourself a leader, or other people would identify you as a leader, right? You're in the spotlight. You're being watched. Every breath you take, every move you make, I'll be watching. You know what always cracked me up about that song? Is that people would play it at weddings. They do their wedding dance to it. And it's a song about a stalker. Come on. You guys see this? I mean, come on. So, why are they watching you so carefully? You're the leader. You're the manager. You're their supervisor. They report to you. Why are they watching you so carefully?
Because people want to learn from leaders.
Okay, so part of it could be a very legitimate, I want to learn. Hopefully this person's got something to give me. Good. Tim?
I think people have a tendency to want to tear others down.
Okay. All right, so I'm looking for a mistake so that either I feel good about myself because I know that the leader makes mistakes too, or now I've got, something to rumor about, to gab about, to complain about, and to attack with.
Or for personal gain, especially in politics. It's
Okay.
all about
Okay.
go down, I go up.
Okay. All right, excellent. Did you have one?
Well, I was going to say 2 points. One is maybe sometimes people in the organization want to be the leader, so if they're watching the leader to see, okay, how does this guy act, because that's what I want to do. I think the other one, there's still a lot of emphasis on having mentors, so sometimes you want the leader kind of acts as a mentor because you're modeling everything.
Okay. All right.
Leaders are powerful. They have wide effects. When someone says something, it can affect their stock price. It can affect, employees, everything.
Okay. Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's get over here for a little bit. Where's our mic?
I think as humans, we have a tendency to want to personify something. So
Okay.
an organization's leaders, we're able to personify that organization and see what that organization is from a human perspective.
Okay, good.
I think there's a misperception that leaders are infallible, and we always talk about holding people to a higher moral standard.
One of the things I like about Adam is that he always foreshadows me. He does it in negotiations class as well, that he's talking about stuff that I want to talk about in 10 minutes. So
I'll stop talking.
Please come back to it. Please come back to it.
I would say that there's a predisposition that a lot of people actually want to follow. So in an organization where you're being watched, you're setting, the pace that other people are mimicking. You say people get hired in these organizations because they're like-minded, they're following the same dress code, they're following the same practices, and as a leader, you're the kind of bellwether that they keep checking against to say, am I doing the right thing?
Okay, all right. Absolutely. That's been great. And over to Sean.
I'd say it's because we're invested in leaders.
Okay, in what way?
So I could take Obama, when he's elected in 2008, right? I think I have that right. People said, I believe in him, so if he makes a mistake, then it discredits my decision to put him in there.
Okay.
So I want to make sure that my decision was valid.
Okay, good. John.
Kind of following what the previous two gentlemen were just talking about. Leaders, in just the name itself, they lead. So what people are looking in leaders is kind of a couple things. Is it a direction that I want to go in? Am I aligned with what that leader is trying to say? And kind of in the case of politics, as Greg was mentioning, is this someone that I do want to lead? Or in the case of business, is this a CEO that I want to work for? Should I be looking to switch companies now because I'm not quite aligned with the Yahoo CEO you just talked about?
Just a couple more. Go back here.
I think going off of what this gentleman was saying down here as far as personification as well, that I think it puts a face to accountability. So when we were invested in our leaders and we gave them the power to make the decisions and take the responsibility, when something does go awry or if something goes good, here is this person here that we can say, you're responsible for this, and therefore you're accountable
Okay.
for all of the actions.
Okay, good. Sarah, and then Lynette, and we'll move forward.
I feel as though leaders today are in this, their actions are more visible now. I think that the advancements in technology obviously makes all of comments that people make, they go viral very quickly, and I think people are a lot more privy to kind of these conversations that might not otherwise have been historically publicized or making the front pages of the news. So the way that communication is spreading, I think, makes the leaders more visible in their actions, thus
Okay.
more scrutinized.
Okay, good. Down here.
I think it's interesting that I think it all depends on who is viewing the leader. So I've worked in marketing and communications, and sometimes, those things that make the person seem vulnerable, celebrities on a bad hair day or whatever, make people feel more endeared towards the person. And there are other people that will be like, no, I never want to follow someone who has a bad hair day, and then how their further actions deal with it. So I just think that, I hear a lot of broad statements about it, but I think it really is going to depend on the type of person who's interacting with the imagery.
You're foreshadowing me a little bit too. And everything that was said here was very good, very sophisticated, but I want to just simplify it a little bit. Leaders are in the spotlight because they're the most important part of your day. And many of you, that was basically what you were saying. You were just sort of expressing it differently in a more expanded way. But they're the most important part of your day. They're the ones that praise you. They're the ones that are going to decide what assignments you work on. If they're in a bad mood, you're in a bad mood. You're worried. Okay? You've got to keep your eyes on this person. They're the dominant one in the room because they're your boss. And here's another thing. We know, we'll talk about this a little bit more later, we know beyond a shadow of a doubt that emotion is contagious. That we begin to not only recognize, but we begin to feel the emotions of the dominant person in the room. So if your leader is stressed out, guess how you're going to feel? Stressed out. Okay? If she's anxious, you're going to feel anxious. If she's mad, you're going to feel worried. Okay? And so you're in the spotlight. Everything you do is being paid attention to. How many of you have sent an email that has been misinterpreted? Apparently people lose their sense of humor when they're reading emails. They know it's coming from me. They know I'm dry and brutal in my humor, but they still take umbrage to it. Okay? Because everything you do is being watched, and being watched very carefully. This is one of the burdens of leadership. The recognition that that is important. That every day, what you do, what you say it, how you conduct yourself, and how the emotions that you're expressing are being watched very carefully and having a big impact on the ability of the people around you to execute their responsibilities. Right? This is a lot of work, and I don't care whether you're tired, you're angry, you're worried. Stow it. You're not helping people work well. Back to something I said earlier, and I'm going to reiterate it and treat it in a little bit more detail later. The number one job of a leader is to provide a positive emotional tone because you're in the spotlight, because people are paying attention to you. Okay. All right. This is a guy probably most of you don't know, although a towering CEO of the 20th century. His name is Peter Brabeck, and he is now the board of directors of Nestle. He was the CEO for 18 years. He began his career at Nestle at 7 years old, pushing an ice cream cart on the streets of Caracas. He's now 80. He has a 73-year tenure with Nestle. Nestle, by the way, has the highest identifiable tenure of any organization in the world. 33 years. Remarkable. It's a nice place to work. Okay? Let me tell you just a little bit about Nestle. It has market penetration, 285,000 employees. Market penetration in every single country in the world, including North Korea, and Antarctica. There are 2 permanent food stations on Antarctica. Nestle owns them both. They are the world's largest holder of private water reserves because they believe that water is the next oil, and I think they're right. I think they're right. They manufacture 15,362 discrete products, and that's an imprecise count. Give or take 500. They don't even know what they manufacture. This organization is so big and so complex. So I was involved in an executive leadership program for Nestle. What we did was we took the top 3,000 officers of the firm and put them through an identical program. We had operations in Singapore and London and in Miami. I got the Miami and I reported directly to him. Okay. So one day he said to me, what I want most for Nestle is for everyone to do a little better bit by bit, day by day. Now that's a profound statement. Imagine if 385,000 people did their job just a little bit better every day. Can you imagine the cumulative impact of this? He understood he couldn't change Nestle in a radical or revolutionary way. It was too big. It was too complex. So he approached it as an evolutionary process. Now think about this as a way to lead. Okay? Think about this. Heather, if you could just do it just a little differently, this would really help me. And I think it would just sort of clear this up. Heather's going to go, sure, it's a little request. Not a big deal. She's going to like it. Okay? Because I'm going to give her better feedback. Well, thank you. Oh boy, this is really helpful now. She's going to like it. And it empowers her to take the next step. You see, I've given her something that's digestible, that's actionable, and that isn't frightening. So she's willing to take that step. We'd all be willing to take that step. By the way, this is also how we need to lead ourselves. Because small shifts have a big impact. Small shifts have a big impact. We oftentimes have this idea that you and I, to be a leader, we're going to somehow fundamentally transmogrify, pull off our shirt and have a leotards on that says, I'm a leader. Okay, that we're going to somehow, we're Superman. We're a completely different person than we were. It's not true. Okay? To become a leader, because remember, anybody can get better as a leader, but it takes time. You do it little bits at a time. So this is how you lead yourself as well. Okay? Because this little small shift has a big impact. And because you're in the spotlight, it has a bigger impact. Right? People are paying attention. You do one little thing better, they say, wow, he did this better. I noticed this. Maybe it's just simply, as simple as making eye contact when people are talking to you, as opposed to being on your phone going, yeah, I gotcha. I mean, maybe it's that small of a thing, and because you're in the spotlight, right, it's having a big impact. Okay? If you do your job just a little bit better, that probably means that Tim can do his job a little better, and Sean can do his a little better. Because if you're providing, you've done it a little bit better quality, numbers organized, a little better analyzed, a little differently, that makes it easier for him to do his and easier for him to do his. This is the pebble in a still pond. Take advantage of this as leaders. Take advantage. This is now not 30,000 foot stuff, right? This is concrete stuff. And this is something you can do tomorrow. Okay? Not just to lead yourself, but also to help lead others. Hillary, you have a mic?
You bring up a really good point, because I think a lot of times with change management in organizations, people see...
Hold on just a second. A little closer.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I think you bring up a really good point, because within change management in organizations, a lot of times when a new leader comes in and has these great big ideas and it can really transform the organization, but a number of the people underneath just see that as, well, either you're going to change my role and my position as it is, And for me, that's going to require a lot more work. And so then there's this whole era of pushback before things can actually get done. So I like the real, like the small shift
The measuring,
sort of concept.
thoughtful, calculated. Our last dean, Doug Guthrie, who I'm good friends with, made a critical mistake walking in the door as he tried to move too fast. Here, we're slow moving, and he, by the way, I've said this to his face many times, so I'm not speaking out of school here. He tried to do too much too fast, tried to fundamentally transform a place. And remember, this is a university, we move slow. And there's a reason why universities move slow. We need conservative institutions within society. We need things that bring stability within society. And universities, of course, other than churches, are the longest running organizations in the world. So we're pretty successful. Okay? And we've been successful because we don't chase trends. Okay? We've been successful because we govern ourselves in a very conservative fashion. That was his mistake. Okay? Exactly to your point. He didn't say little things. He said, you, and you have to be completely different of university or faculty members than you are now. Right? And we went, what? Really? And one of the first things he said is everybody's going to have to work a lot harder. Really? Now contrast that. Again, I love Doug. He's a friend of mine, and he did a lot of wonderful stuff. Now contrasting with our new dean, which, by the way, we were smart and we did not appoint a great academic as dean. Okay, we appointed somebody who'd been a dean for 19 years and a successful dean who's a consensus builder. What she's doing is exactly this. Okay, guys, I think if we could do this, it'd be really good. The alumni would really respond well to this. And everybody's like, oh yeah, I can do that. That'd be just fine. So it's these little steps, and already there's a palpable difference. Okay, she's also culturally a different person. I mean, in terms of spotlight, okay, she's a very calming presence. Doug was a very intense guy, and sometimes that that created some anxiety there. She's this very calm person, and you kind of have this breath when you're around her, which is having a real positive impact. So exactly to your point. Exactly to your point. Small shifts have a big impact. Okay. Popular leadership accounts tend to emphasize individuals. So when we think about leadership, we tend to think about a person, a personification of leadership. Who's the most famous CEO of the 20th century? Jack Welch. A lot of people would say Steve Jobs. I think he's actually the most significant one of the 21st century. Welch. More books have been written about Jack Welch than any other business leader in the world. Notice the yellow tie. He's allowed to wear the yellow tie. You are not. It's a club, right? The executive club. Now, what does this imply? This implies something. These accounts that are out there talk about specific individuals. What does that suggest or imply to you and I in terms of what we need to do to be a better leader?
Separate ourselves from the crowd. I mean, if they emphasize individualism for the leader, if they're emphasizing individuals for leadership.
If they emphasize individuals for leadership, then you have to separate yourself from the crowd in some way, shape, or form. And that kind of goes back to what Adam's question was earlier in the class about how to make that upward mobility within your organization is you always have to be a kind of a go-getter and get that leadership role whenever you can.
Okay? I think there's something a little more fundamental here. That to be a good leader, you've got to be more like Jack. Right? Now, there's nothing wrong with role model. Okay? But for me to advance, I need to be Neutron Jack. Okay? I used to love those Nike commercials, be like Mike. I'm 5'9". I ain't going to be like Mike, and the sneakers ain't going to make me any more like it. But be like Jack. These sort of imply that we should be somebody that we're not. We should assume the persona of somebody that we're not. Now, what happens if you start to act like Jack? What do other people around you see you as now? fake, a phony, disingenuous. What relationship does that compromise? Trust. Okay. And if I don't trust you, I will not follow you. Okay. This is not social science mumbo jumbo here, folks. This is a mathematical equation. If you try to be somebody that you're not, I see you as disingenuous. If I see you as disingenuous, I don't trust you. Because nobody trusts a fake or a phony. And if I don't trust you, I will not be led by you. I will not be led by you. By the way, you aren't assigned your leaders. You choose your leaders. Okay. You decide who your leader is. So I would choose not to be led by you. Okay. This is math. So, Proposition 5. Leadership means being authentic, which means being yourself skillful. Be yourself, but do it skillfully. Now, what might I mean by that? You've got to be authentic. You've got to be who you are, or else you're going to be seen as disingenuous. To be authentic, you have to be yourself, but you have to do it skillfully. What could I possibly mean by that? Unusual phrase.
I think you're hitting up on what we've talked about, is that there are skills that you can learn over time. So I have to be Adam, and I have to lead the way Adam would lead, but you can show me, and this class can show me better ways to do some things that in my own style to be a better leader.
That's exactly right. There's nothing wrong with looking at Jack Welch and saying, boy, those are some things that he did really well, and I can do them in my own style. I don't have to act like Jack. I can bring them in, but I have to be true to who I am. I have to be authentic. Okay? Where's the mic over here?
I think self-awareness is a big part of it.
Okay.
We've all had leaders that, as they're talking or directing, you are just rolling your eyes or muttering under your breath, what are you talking about? But then knowing how you're perceived is really important.
Okay.
I know I can be really sarcastic, and sometimes that's not productive.
Okay.
Job.
Okay.
So I'm trying to do that.
Okay, right. Well, and I mean, what you're saying is, to really understand your own authenticity, you've got to be a bit self-aware to start that out, that this is who I am and this is what I do. And you said a bit sarcastic?
Yes, I can be.
You can be a bit sarcastic. Can sarcasm be an effective leadership skill?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. But not always. And it has to be placed at the right time, with the right audience, to the right degree. So sometimes to be yourself skillfully, you have to be yourself less. No joke. You have to be yourself less. I'll give you an example. Steve Jobs was genius at being Steve Jobs at Apple. Steve Jobs failed when he went to Disney. He failed because he couldn't be any less than Steve Jobs. Right? But here's Disney, this completely different context, completely different business, and a completely different tradition. So they ran him off the board. Okay? Now, he got a good deal going off the board, but nevertheless, in terms of his contributions to the board and to Disney per se, it was a failure. Okay? He needed to be himself less, but of course he wasn't capable of being himself less. Okay? Other examples, other sort of comments here that I'm going to ask.
I was just going to say that we seem to be leading towards the emotional intelligence.
Okay.
Self-aware, but also aware of your teammates, aware of external forces, how they perceive the group, all that stuff.
Okay. Okay, and that's true, and that might be, sort of back to Tim's point earlier about, everything getting softer and more emotional and weaker and all the rest of it. That you probably need to respond to that, given the workforce. Okay? But let's say it's not really you. So you've got to figure out a way to do that, to do it more without compromising who you are, because people are going to see you as a fake, because they know who Tim is. Okay? So you've got to find a way to be a little bit more sensitive to people, be a little more empathetic to people without losing who you are. By maintaining that, because if he tries to say, oh, I'm so sorry that happened to you, let's go talk about it, people are going to say, this isn't Greg. Okay, he's faking it. He doesn't mean it. But if he does a little bit more of it, then it might actually be applied very skillfully in that particular context. Other things. Yeah.
I just have a question. Can a leader ever regain credibility after they've made the mistakes of?
I think so, and it's a little off topic, but I think it does fit in. But the way I would put it is, and I'm doing some research on this, is that we will forgive anything from our leaders, incompetence, mistakes, failures, except betrayal. The moment they betrayed, they can never regain credibility. Okay? We will never be led by them again. Any of you ever been thrown under the bus? I've been thrown under the bus. I know what it feels like. And that person is my arch enemy. Okay? And I am looking for an opportunity to get back at him. Because revenge is sweet. No, I wouldn't do anything like that. Absolutely, people can regain credibility, okay, but not if they burned you that bad. So,
I just have a question. I think, do these factors hold true across cultures? For example, there are some cultures that are, the leadership factors need to be more coercive, so the style needs to be more coercive than democratic. So what we're talking about is more of a flexible democratic leadership style. I'm talking about management in Afghanistan. I was working at the Embassy of Afghanistan. It's more of a coercive management style, and that's what works in that sort of an environment. So
yeah, I think that the principle still applies, but it has to be sensitive to the context and the environment. Okay, so if you're in one that has a heavy honors sort of a tribal custom, okay, well, you need to honor that tribal custom, but now how do you have to shift you authentically to be effective within that given environment? You need to be a little more or a little less of yourself. So I think that it's still true. It's a matter of applying it intelligently to the given environment. I would argue that would be the case. That this is a truth, and it's now a matter of how to. However, let me point something out here. If to be effective in your work context, you have to be inauthentic. You have to not be yourself. You're in the wrong job. Because look, we all have to conform. We all have to conform. There's no question about that. In this company, you don't talk this way, you don't do that thing, you don't wear, these kind of clothes, whatever it is. We've all got to conform. But when we're being asked to conform to the point that we're no longer being authentic, it's time to go. Right? It's just time to go. So I don't know where that magic point is, but okay. Authenticity. Here's the definition. To be authentic is to be of undisputed origin. I know exactly who I am, and this goes back to the comment earlier by Tim about self-awareness. I know exactly who I am. And here's my favorite example of authenticity. And it's really unusual that I should use Dolly Parton as an example of authenticity because there are no original parts on this woman. They've all been swapped out, at one point or another. But she said one time about herself, see, I don't think you can say that about yourself unless you're authentic. She knows exactly who she is. She knows exactly where she came from. She knows exactly why she's done the things she did. Right? And is authentic because of it. And by the way, an incredibly savvy business person, right? Dollywood, and she's bought, Willie Nelson's songbook? She owns Willie Nelson's songbook. Because 10 years ago, the IRS came to Willie Nelson's door and said, you owe us $25 million. And Willie went, whoops, I don't have it. Okay? She stood up, bought his songbook, said, here's the money, but now I own all your songs and I get all the royalties. She owns Porter Wagner's songbook and a whole series of other things. She's an incredibly astute business person. And by the way, was underestimated her whole career, her whole business career, right? Because people said, oh, come on, look at this. I don't have to worry about this person being sharp, and she was very sharp, so she used that to her advantage. But I just think that she's a good example of what it means to be authentic. By the way, she has interesting recording artists. She has sales in every single demographic group, which means that there's some Dolly Parton fans in this room. Perhaps you're a closet Dolly Parton fan, but you are. And you're going the rest of the day, you're going to have this song going through your head. He'll come again. See? I did it. I just planted it for some of you the rest of the day. You're not going to be able to get it out of your head. Okay, so 2 creatures here. On the left-hand side, we have Rudy Giuliani. He had 911. He is down at ground zero, at risk of loss of life and limb. On the right-hand side, we have Helen Mirren, who's playing the role of Queen Elizabeth in the movie The Queen. Did anybody see the film, The Queen? Very, very, very much worth watching. Okay. It's a well done film. Okay. Now, what distinguishes or differentiates these 2 characters? Oh, and particularly, I'm sorry, in The Queen, the movie The Queen, it was about the royal response to Princess Diana's death. Okay, so that was the situation. What distinguishes these 2 people, given their situations? Stacy?
If I'm not mistaken, so Rudy Giuliani came down to the scene and he was hands-on, and the Queen was very hands-off, and I think she kind of, stayed out of the spotlight.
That's exactly right. That Rudy saw that this was of enormous importance. Okay. He went down there, he was everywhere with information, he was exposed, constant feedback from the police, he really knew what was going on, he understood that this was a significant moment. And I was living in New York at the time, and we were kind of done with Rudy as mayor. Okay? He'd been very effective, cleaned up the streets, crime rate had gone down, but he's an irascible guy, he's a bit of a bully, and it was sort of, it's just time for somebody new here. And this event, this single event, what would have happened if not for this event is he would have gone away and worked for a law firm and become very, very rich because of his contacts. Okay? We never really would have heard from him again. But this single event catapulted him to be a serious contender for the Republican nomination. Now, Helen Mirren, okay, the Queen. What did the Queen do? Diana dies. The royal office issues a letter saying, "We are deeply chagrined at the death of Princess Diana. She was a valued member of our family and will always be remembered by us and the people." And then she took off up to Scotland, okay? So Prince Philip could go elk hunting, and she could sit around and drink tea and do whatever else the royals do. Okay? The movement Britain is crying. Okay? The nation is crying over this. And she just refuses to respond to it. The guy who plays Tony Blair in the movie, by the way, he channels Tony Blair. I mean, just absolutely channels him. But he's always in her ear saying, "Lizzie, I think maybe, you want to do something, you want to acknowledge this," but she was, no, that's below the royals. She finally got it through her head. Okay? She went to Buckingham Palace where all the flowers and everything, the memorials were the spontaneous memorials were being erected, and she lays flowers as well, turns around and talks to people, and so kind of got over it. But that spoiled the reputation of British royalty for a long, long time. Okay, Parliament took away their jet. Okay. You no longer have your own jet. You're just going to have to fly in planes. Book your ticket, fly just like all the rest of us. They did a whole series of things there. And the British people, the popularity ratings of the royals just plummeted until just recently with William and what was that, the baby and all that. So what's the point here? Good leaders have superb situation sensing skills. Good leaders have superb situation sensing skills. Because they're paying attention. And because they're paying attention to you. Because you know what? If you, as my boss, don't understand what's going on with me or my unit, you're daft. You're daft. And I'm not going to follow you. I'm not going to follow you unless you understand this situation that we find ourselves in and respond to that situation. I always like salespeople. I think salespeople are a good example of this because a salesperson will walk up and they'll say, hey, how you doing? And one of two things is going to happen. They know right now whether they've got a potential sale. If they've got a potential sale, squeeze a little harder, move in, look you right in the eyes. Okay? If they don't feel the potential sale, they go, let me know if I can help you. Because you know what? You're the situation for a salesperson, aren't you? You're the situation for a salesperson. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever found yourself in a situation that you were the last to know something. For example, that an affair was going on in the office. You were the last person to notice it or be aware of it. You might need to pay a little bit of attention to your situation-sensitive skills. Leaders are watching. They're paying attention because this is what's important. If my workforce, something going on with you guys that I don't understand, once again, you won't follow me because I'm not tuned in to what it is and what's most important to you. This is my favorite example of this. Okay. So who we have is Nelson Mandela on the left. On the right, we have the captain of the South African rugby team. That rugby team has just won the World Cup of Rugby. Okay. So Mandela goes out to congratulate. No big deal, right? No big deal. When the Redskins win the Super Bowl, such a thing were to ever happen, again, they go in and President Obama would shake their hands, or whatever, President Macaulay Culkin, because it'll probably be that far into the future. So they go in and shake the hand, and the whole deal. Okay? What's different here? What's different here about that? The symbolism of that.
It's the whole situation. The apartheid rugby was traditionally a white sport in South Africa, and Nelson Mandela really backed the team and said, this is our country, this is our team, we need to support them.
Exactly. Daniel?
Never mind the fact that Mandela was in prison for however many years as a result of the apartheid, so kind of overcoming to be able to congratulate a representative of that oppression is pretty symbolic.
And you guys are exactly right. I'm going to point out a couple other elements here. He's wearing the jersey and the hat of the rugby team. Okay? Right? Obama is not going to pull on a Redskins jersey. They're not going to do that. They'll stand there in a suit, going to shake the hands as they go by. They're going to, have some Dr. Pepper out for everybody, and that's going to be it. Okay? He put the jersey on. Now, anybody remember the name of the South African rugby team? The Springboks. Anybody remember the symbol, the official symbol of apartheid? The Springbok. He pulled on that jersey, put on that hat, and walked out there as if to say, the old divisions are gone. This is our victory as a country, and this symbol will no longer divide us. He saw this moment. And he acted on it and was absolutely beloved. And this is largely considered the moment of the birth of the new South Africa. Right here. Right here. We contrast that to Katrina and Bush. Here was a significant event, and 4 days after it happens, he decides to do a flyover. And says, ooh, that looks bad. And then, went right back to Camp David, or to his ranch in Texas, or whatever it happened to be. So, good leaders have good situation sensing skills, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later on, where those skills come from. Okay, two people. Two lions, World War II. My dad was a World War II vet, so I grew up listening to World War II stories. That's Winston Churchill, of course, on the left. I'm always worried when I put a picture of Winston Churchill up on the board because I'm afraid he's going to jump out and bite me. Okay? Anybody ever seen a picture of Churchill and his dog? His dog was an English bulldog, and you can't actually tell the difference between which one's Churchill and which one's the dog. Okay? And on the right-hand side is Le Général, okay, Charles de Gaulle. Gaulle, of course, famous for his work in the French underground during World War II that was very effective, perhaps critical in dislodging the Nazi occupation of France. Now, when Churchill first came to power, he was told that the only way to peace was to negotiate with Mr. Hitler. And his response was, word for word, I will negotiate with Mr. Hitler the day that one or the other of us lies face down in a pool of our own blood. Whoa! Whoa! He gave one speech to Parliament. One speech during the entire war years. I have nothing to offer you but blood, sweat, toil, and tears. Jeez, this is a strange guy, right? This is a strange guy. But he was exactly what Britain needed for that moment. He wasn't just the prime minister, he was Britain. Good leaders aren't just for the people, they are the people. I am one of you. I'm not just here separately. I am one of you that's struggling the same thing. See, Churchill understood that Britain was an island nation that had not been invaded since 1066. And that our resolve lies in our understanding of who we are and our complete staunchness and rejection of compromise. He was the British people. Now, Charles de Gaulle, post-World War II, we're at Malta. We've got Stalin, Churchill, and Roosevelt that are basically splitting up the world. Sort of like, oh, you know, you take the Sudetenland, and you guys get to have that. And Egypt, anybody? Egypt? So they're splitting up the world, and de Gaulle is just disagreeing with everything. He's not at that primary table, by the way. Okay, but he's just fighting everything. And at one point, Winston Churchill says to him, Charles, you've got to hate your friends less than you hate your enemies. And de Gaulle's response was, this is wonderful. France has no friends. It has only interests. Pretty interesting. Pretty interesting, because at this point, remember, 2 world wars had been fought on French soil. They paid for this in blood and land and destruction. Right? And he was at the point where nobody's our friends anymore. France is going to take care of France. That's it. Okay? And even to today, right? France will sell jets or arms to countries that Britain and the United States have an arms embargo against, because they say, oh, we don't care whether it's the right thing to do, it benefits us. Okay? In the EU and the unification, France is always getting these exceptions. They just got 3 days ago an exception for their debt repayment. They said, let us wait. Can we wait? Come on, we're France. You know we're good for it. And cheeses, unpasteurized cheeses. And the French are like, you can't do that. It's a cheese. It's our cheese. And so it's all right, okay, you can have it in their interests. Okay? France isn't really worried about the rest of us. France is worried about France, and that was perfectly compatible with the ethic and the mind frame of the French people in 1943. Perfectly compatible with it. He was the French. So good leaders just aren't of the people or for the people. They are the people. They know what you're going through. They know what you feel. They know your vision, how you're, what you're seeing from. They have walked a mile in your shoes. They understand that what you see depends on where you sit, and they're going to sit there so that they can see it. That's who I want to be led by. Somebody that understands what I'm going through. Somebody that understands the struggles that me and my unit and my division are facing. That's who I want to be led by. And if you don't see those things, you're daft, and I'm not going to follow. All right, 2 characters up here. We're going to focus for time's sake just on the left one, which is Maggie Thatcher, one of my great examples, or an example of one of the great leaders in my mind. Maggie had a nickname. What was her nickname?
The Iron Lady.
The Iron Lady. Why was she called the Iron Lady? She was awesome. She was awesome. She was called the Iron Lady basically because she did not suffer fools well. Okay? She pushed her case forward, even when it was unpopular, and if you got in her way, she took you down. And if you said something stupid, she would say, that's the goddamn dumbest thing I've ever heard. Why is it when you open your mouth, there's an idiot wind blowing in here? she would just go after people, okay? Just eviscerate you verbally. Okay? Now, one time she said, every prime minister needs a good Willie. Kind of an odd thing to say, right? Okay. But what she means is Willie Whitlaw. Willie Whitlaw was her chief of staff. And Willie Whitlaw was the guy that followed behind her, and after she just destroyed you, he'd come up and say, it's okay. She really admires you. She didn't mean that. Don't let it get you down. Okay? He was basically the guy with the broom behind the elephant. Okay? So this was Willie's job. Okay? Now, what's the point here is that good leaders reveal and recognize their weaknesses. And they compensate for them. Some of us, we started to pick this up. I think it was you a little bit earlier. Okay. Don't try to conceal your weaknesses. Reveal them skillfully. Why? Do I have microphones over here?
I was just going to say, because if you don't acknowledge them and embrace them, people can use them against you.
Okay, all right, they could be used against you. Great.
Helps to build trust.
Okay, you know, I'm much more likely to trust somebody who's just made themselves vulnerable. Okay, I've made myself vulnerable by telling you that I'm not good at this, or this is one of the flat spots in my wheel. I'm going to look back at that person and say, wow, you know, I could take advantage of this now, but now I'm not going to because they've admitted it. Good. What else? What are other good reasons for this?
And you can act to improve them?
Again?
You can act to improve those weaknesses.
Okay, I can act to improve them, and I might even ask you to help me improve them. Guess what? We like helping people. Okay? And when we're brought in and asked to do something like that, yeah, I'll try to do that. I'll point it out when you do that. Whatever it happens to be, I'll let you know that you've done it again. So I'm here for you. I like that. I appreciate that sort of thing. Go here first. Yeah.
Because you mentioned earlier that good leaders aren't just for people, they're the people.
Okay.
And also, that makes me also realize that I have my own weakness to
Okay.
work on.
All right. That's a very good point. That, look, you know what? You're flawed. You know how we like our leaders? We like them just like we like ourselves, flawed. And they become one of us when those weaknesses are revealed. Some leaders have this idea that they have to be perfect. Okay? And they're not perfect. And you and I see through that. We know they're not perfect, but they act perfect, so they're being disingenuous, and which affects our trust, which means we won't be led by them. And you know what? They already know your weakness. They already know what it is. Okay? And if you don't admit it, there's two possibilities here. Okay? Either you're obtuse and have no self-awareness whatsoever, okay? Or you're a liar and you're deceiving me. Neither one of those engenders trust, right? Neither one of those engenders trust. And once again, no trust, no leadership. So once again, skillfully reveal these. You don't have to reveal every bit and piece of them. And there's certain weaknesses they don't need to know about. Okay? So you don't need to just walk in and say, "Hey, everybody, I'm really bad at this. You know, I suck at Dungeons and Dragons." This is not helpful. It's not relevant to the context. So a couple other examples here. Richard Branson is dyslexic. Can't interpret a simple balance sheet. It's all bells and whistles to him. Okay? So he has to compensate for this. So he surrounds himself with the best financial minds in the world. Okay? Builds relationships of trust with them, compensates them fairly, gives them a piece of the business. They trust him because obviously he's been successful in lots of different businesses. He's had a few that have failed, and he sold them off. But so he's just painfully aware of this. I've got neighbors just down a few houses. And he's about 6'3", His chin has apparently been carved out of granite. She's about 5'8", could be a catalog model. They've got these 2 twin boys that every morning come out. They're so well behaved and so much advanced in reading. They're like in 2nd grade and they're reading at an 8th grade level and all this. And they come out every day all clean, their hair cut nicely, matching Ralph Lauren suits and everything. Their house is gorgeous. I mean, everything. There's no laundry on the floor. There's no cat box that hasn't been scooped for a week. None of this sort of thing. Their car, we don't have garages, okay? So their car is parked in the alley like everybody else, but apparently birds don't fly over their cars. I don't know how, okay? But it's just the case. And I hate these people because they make me feel bad about myself, okay? They get up and make fruit smoothies and then go for runs and all the rest of this stuff. So literally, I see them in the alley and it's like, hi, you don't have time to talk. I just don't want to deal with it. We don't like perfect people. We don't like perfect bosses. Use your weaknesses. It humanizes you. It helps to make you, as you said, Jan, it makes you one of them. You are now them. Okay, here's the big question. Here's the big one. Why should anybody want to be, sorry, that should be led. By the way, I'm dyslexic too. And so if spell check doesn't pick it up, that looks just fine to me. Okay? It looks just fine to me. There's some times when this sort of stuff embarrasses you, by the way. But this one's not too bad. Why should anybody want to be led by you? This is the equivalent of asking the question, why should anybody want to be lifted by you? Why should anybody want to be inspired by you? But to answer this question, we have to first think as followers. Think of yourself as a follower for a minute, not as a leader. And spend a minute writing down things that you want from your leader. What do you want? Spend a minute or so jotting down some things that you want. Okay, so tell me some things you want, and just for this case, I don't think we need the microphones. Just kind of speak the word out a little bit aloud, and I'll probably repeat it anyway. So,
I guess help them realize their potential and give them access to resources.
Okay, I want somebody that's going to help me realize my potential, and when possible, provide resources to assist in the achievement thereof. Sound good? Great.
Visibility.
Visibility. What do you mean?
In terms of how things are done, why policies were written a certain way.
Okay.
Overall operations.
I'm putting it in a slightly different way. I'm going to say transparency.
Sure.
I want to know why things have been done in this way. I want to be kept informed. I don't want to be kept in the dark. Okay, great. Approachability. I want to know that I can come up and talk to you and not be afraid that you're going to pull a Maggie Thatcher on me. Okay? That I can approach you at any time about anything, so long as it's relevant, but great.
Accessibility.
Accessibility. Okay? Not only can I approach you, but you make time for me. You actually build it in.
Honest feedback.
Honest feedback. Okay? There can be feedback, but it's not necessarily honest feedback. I want honest, I want it constructively critical, okay? Because I can't change my performance and do my job well until I get that information.
Fair treatment.
Fair treatment. I want equity in the workplace. How many of you have worked somewhere that there's favoritism going on? Somebody's getting a better deal than you are. Somebody's not working as hard as you are, and they're making more money, they're getting more attention, and they're more of a darling of the administration. I mean, many of us have had that. Okay? I want equity. I want fairness, not just in my own compensation, in my own recognition, but in the recognition of the people around me. We have to socially compare. Jeremy?
Consistency.
Consistency. I want to know that one day you're going to that I don't work for Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Okay, and I've had this happen in my life where I never knew which one I was going to get. I never knew whether I was going to get slapped or French kissed. So it's not consistency. And I would point out emotional consistency as well. Okay, this person that has an emotional stability issue, and you never know where you're going to catch them down here, you're going to catch them up here, or somewhere in between, and that makes me nervous. I want that kind of consistency.
Passion about the work.
Passion. Okay, that they use the word care as well. They're excited about this, and remember, emotion is contagious. So the passion that they have for it is probably going to pull over to you. You're going to start to pick some of them up. And then he said, they care. God, how simple. I want somebody to care about me. Well, don't you? I think that this is pretty common. It's not an unusual instinct. So just respect. Respect. I want to be respected as a professional and treated as a professional. Good.
To follow on the passion, inspired.
Inspired. I want to be inspired. I don't, as opposed to the Ramones, I want to be sedated. I want to be inspired. I want to be excited about this. I want you to convince me that I can be more than I am and can achieve things that I didn't even think I could achieve. Okay, Megan.
Someone we can learn from.
I want to have a role model. I want to be able to learn from them and be taught.
I was going to say knowledge, so knowledge.
Well, and I want expertise too. I want them to know what they're talking about, certainly.
I want an investment. So like not the kind of scenario you gave before where the investment is you're going to work these people to death and then burn them out.
Yeah, an investment. I want an investment in the outcome here. I want to be, I don't want to just do something spectacular and not get any benefit from that. I want to be vested in the result.
I want a leader who can understand the project support role in addition to the project lead role, because I think it's really important to understand the different dynamics and how to support them.
And let's just frame it just a little bit more broadly here. I want a leader who understands the different roles that people are playing in the organization. So,
someone who also has a sense of humor.
Okay, good. It's so strange to me how people don't bring that up very often. Because I'm going to put it a little bit different way. I want to have fun. Do you want to have fun at work? Hey, how many of you had a boss that encouraged you having fun at work? Not as many heads going now. Okay, a few. Okay, everybody in the room said yes to fun. I think I had 4 hands go up when somebody actually encouraged that fun, and that can come through a sense of humor. That's some way to loosen people up, make them laugh during the course of the day. Yeah.
I was going to say vision.
Okay. Okay, a vision. I said something clear, something compelling. This is where we're going and why we're going there.
I want a leader that's going to back me up. So if there's a problem, they're going to back my side.
I got your back. I got your back, okay? Maybe you did stumble on this. That's okay. I'm going to take the heat because you were doing it honorably in good conscience, okay? And you weren't irresponsible or negligent here. So I'm going to take the heat for you. You don't worry about it. Last one.
I want a leader who can implement on that vision.
That can what?
Implement on
Implement on that
that vision.
vision. So has skills and ability to execute. Okay, great. Wonderful list. Here's what I'm going to tell you. Is that when you get into a position of leadership, a position of supervision, when you become the boss, you damn well be spending time creating this for the people around you. Transparency, okay? Role modeling, care, understanding different roles. If you don't do that, you've just said this is what you want as a leader. then you better do it when you become a leader. You better spend the time and the energy necessary to do that. And if not, you're a hypocrite. Sorry. You're hypocritical if you say, here's the things I want, but by the way, I'm not going to provide them for you. I'm not going to spend time out of my day working to help achieve these things for you. Okay? It's the golden rule of leadership. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Okay? If that's what you want your leaders to do, then it's what you need to do. Okay? So, a couple.
Can I add one more?
Yeah.
I want a leader who wants to genuinely know about myself.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. I want to see things from your perspective. Good.
I was going to say, to your point.
I think probably we need microphones now.
Well, I think what you said is important when we become leaders and when we think about how we approach our supervisors. I think at the same time, like all of the things that, for example, like I just wrote down, I'm starting to think of how can I do that to my leader? Because I need to be open, you know, I need to be transparent, I need to be approachable. Like all of those things, I think on the flip side, we should be doing now, regardless if we're in that formal position or not.
Well, I think that's good. You can still help to create a climate of this sort of thing that maybe does have an impact in terms of managing upwards, but also in the people around you. I mean, you can show to your colleagues, to your peers, that you care about them, that you want to see it from their perspective, that, you know, hey guys, this is what I did and why I did it. Here, let me support you on this. Whatever, you can start creating this. Sometimes we think that, oh, I'm in this role, I really can't have an impact. But you can have an impact. Remember, you know, you're in the spotlight. Small shifts have a big difference. And so I sometimes talk about the idea of micro-leading. Okay? We might not be able to lead the whole firm, but we can lead our team or our unit. Maybe we do that by our own conduct. I call it creating microculture. You might not be able to change the organizational culture, but you might be able to have an impact on these 6 people that you work with day in and day out to change that culture. You can have that impact, even if you're not particularly in the spotlight, because you're not the boss. There still is the possibility for you to affect positive change. So this list is not at all, oh, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that I would add a little bit of caveat that I think you have to do these things also skillfully. And I'll give an example. Like I maybe I'm a little bit older, but I ran one of our community emergency medicine sites. And I felt, and I kind of managed a little bit along these principles. So I felt like I'm the type of person, I always wanted to know why. But when I felt that when I would have meetings and explain to everyone else, hey, this is why this can't happen. First of all, you're a little bit isolated because you don't really get feedback from your followers to say, hey, yeah, thanks for explaining that to me. And I think also it became then not transparency, but more, okay, this guy's just giving me excuses as to why this can't happen.
Right.
And I felt that, you know, the first couple of times that was great, but then after that it became, okay, I don't want to know why, I just want to know what and what you're going to do.
Okay. Okay, and I think you're exactly right in that it is a little bit about doing it skillfully. You know, you said sense of humor up here. Well, you know, the context in which you're working, that might not be the overall ethic. You know, we don't joke around here. We don't laugh. You still might be able to interject some of it. You just got to make it humor that's they're going to respond to. That's going to be kind of consistent with their mind frame. Caring. I care about you might not be something you say in some context, but that doesn't mean you can't demonstrate that you do care about somebody else. So this is not an exhaustive list. I think it captured a lot of the things we said. People want community. They want colleagues. And community, by the way, implies trust. It implies caring. It implies being part of something larger than yourself. We want to be part of a community. We want significance. We want to know that what we did and do matters. Okay? That it matters. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to and asked them to describe their job to me, and they did, and I said, well, what's that do down the value chain? how does that affect overall what this company does and what it's trying to achieve? And most of them stammered at that moment. They didn't really understand how this was significant to achieving that. And that's leadership's failure, to not letting you know. Somebody said recognize, or what was yours? Okay, I heard one that kind of went to that point. But to acknowledge what you do is important in these ways. Because I want to have an impact. Okay? I want to have an impact. And I don't care, I don't mean necessarily an impact on the environment or world peace. Okay, but whatever I've chosen as an occupation, I want to know that what I do is important. Okay. Excitement. Okay, we talked about vision, we talked about mission, we talked about some of these sort of things. Inspiration, fun. I want to be excited. I want to think that this is exciting and it's going to be fun and it's going to be challenging and I'm really happy to be a part of this. Okay. Once again, leadership's responsibility and authenticity. I don't want people lying to me. I don't want this backroom stuff. I don't want integrity to be breached. So, next thing to consider. There's the preposition. Now is the time for you to begin to consider your leadership identity and your leadership legacy. Now's the time for you to start to do this, to start to consider this, to start to think about who am I as a leader? What's my brand, if you will? What's my identity? What is it that makes me unique? Because we're all unique. What is it about me, who I am, my authenticity, that makes me the leader that I am? And second, your legacy. What will I be remembered for? What will I be remembered for? So, and I use this, you guys might not be as applicable here, but I use this oftentimes and ask, if you left your organization today, what would people say about you? And then I ask the question, what would you want people to say about you? You do this exercise, usually there's a little disjoint here, okay? Well, I think they'll say I got things done, but they'll also say I was a little bit of a bully, and A, B, and C, but this is the impact I would have liked to have. And so that disjoint becomes the foundation for some sort of leadership learning development plan, of course. I've even had people write their leadership obituaries. Write it up, okay? As it would be today, and as you would like it to be, and to try to point out those differences, to give people the energy to try to do something different, to give them the excitement about who I want to be and what I need to achieve. So one of the things I'm going to be doing is I'm going to post online what I call the Leadership Values Framework that Richard Boyatzis and I have put together, just for you to complete in your own time. And it asks some of these very same questions. It works you through what's called a philosophical orientation questionnaire, a values exercise, a whole series of adjectives that people would use to describe you, and things like that, just to do exactly what we're talking about here, to get you thinking about who you are, what you can be, okay, and what you want to be. Question up here, Jeremy?
I'm just curious. Say that you are...
Mike here.
I'm curious, say that you're placed in a leadership role over a struggling business unit with the expectation of culture change.
Okay.
You have your own leadership philosophies. How do you gauge how to implement a change utilizing your particular leadership philosophy versus what that business unit may need?
Okay. I think we have to hold that conversation until we get to some of this stuff around culture, because I'm going to try to tie these things together once we get there. So it's a great question, but I think we need a little bit more context around our discussions before we can apply it to some specific situations.